I'm Peyton, and this is Jarred. This is Kidtalk.
Kitdalk is where we talk to people who make games, design games,
And pretty much anyone who likes games.
Yeah, and today we're interviewing Johnny O'Neill with Brotherwise Games.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for spending some of your time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
How's your day been so far?
Well, I've really done nothing today other than play Mario Odyssey and send a few emails. So it's been a good day.
So we start all of our interviews with a game of 5-second war. Are you fine doing that?
That sounds good with me.
Have you ever
We all like
played
games.
5-second rule?
I actually have not. So
You name 3 things in 5 seconds.
Okay.
And
this
we
is
have
good.
the prompts right here.
We have a timer, but it makes weird noises.
Do y'all want to use the timer?
It makes weird noises.
Here, y'all can.
When all the marbles get down, then it's been 5 seconds, I guess.
We'll use the timer.
Okay.
So
So, name 3 grocery store chains.
Okay. Jewel Osco, Schnucks, and Vons.
I guess you did that. I have no idea what those are, though. Okay.
name the flavor of popsicle.
Lemon, lime, and strawberry.
I said 3.
And orange.
You missed it.
Technically, lemon and lime.
I meant lemon and lime as separate ones, but, you know.
Name 3 articles of clothing.
Hey, shirt, shoes, hat.
Name 3 things you might find in the backyard.
Grass, flowers, and my son's hair.
You missed that.
Sorry, all I could think of was we just did a backyard haircut, so it's all over the backyard right now.
How did you come up with the name Brotherwise Games?
You know, that's a good question, and it's something that we came up with really only because we were launching a Kickstarter. So my brother and I, we had this idea of making a game, and then he was like, let's put it on Kickstarter, and the game was Boss Monster. But as we were filling out the Kickstarter, we realized we needed a company name. So we just randomly came up with a bunch of other names. I think the second place one was Chrome Cricket Games, like a silver cricket or something. It was completely random, didn't mean anything. But we just sort of liked that Brotherwise played up the fact that we were brothers. And while we're not the only brother game designer team out there, it does speak to the fact that we're like just regular gamers who thought, hey, let's make some games, got together, and did it as brothers.
Which owl are you?
I am this owl. That's what we've decided. My brother's 8 years older than me. He's a little more mature. He's more like he's the actual CEO. I'm just the president, which doesn't mean a lot when a company's as small as ours. But still, he's a little bit more in charge. So here he looks more like a little more serious, a little bit more like the wise owl. Whereas I'm more like, hey,
Is it the game up over on your shelf?
What game?
Yeah.
That's Boss
There's
Monster.
Boss Monster right there.
And then up and to the side?
There's Call to Adventure here. Call to Adventure Name of the Wind. We've got
And then-
Stormlight Archive.
Well, the Con Adventure to the Wind up one.
Up there.
Is that the game?
So actually, up there is a book called "Think Like a Game Designer" by my friend Justin Gary, who designed Night of the Ninja. So he's a really good writer about game design. You should get him on your show sometime. And then I've got my copy of Dragon Prince Battle Charged right here because that's our newest thing.
Where did you put oh. You didn't put it anywhere.
Hey, you've got one too.
It's really fun, and we love the show.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I love the show so much. The idea of trying to make a game for it was kind of intimidating, but it's something we were really lucky to convince the makers of the show. Hey, we really love your show. We know how to make games. Give us a shot at this. And that first game was the result.
did you have any other ideas for like the mechanic and idea of Dragon Prince Battle Charge before you came up with a fighting game? Like, did it used to be
absolutely.
a cooperative game bringing Zim back to the mountain that he was supposed to come from, ever?
Yeah, that's 100%. When you think about the Dragon Prince, the first thing you think is almost like you can think of like a path game of like get Zim over to Zadia to his mom, through all the various obstacles and things. And so actually the first game that we pitched to Wonderstorm was a game that did that in more of a kind of a strategy game way, where you were acting as Rayla and Callum and Ezrin, working together to go through essentially the saga of the first 3 seasons and get Zim to the mountain. And at the same time you were doing that, there's sort of the goal of getting there, competing against the goal of avoiding war between Zadia and the Human Kingdoms.
So it had 2 goals.
Yes, kind of like one of our very favorite games, a very classic game, is War of the Ring, set in the world of Lord of the Rings. And in that one, you're both trying to get the ring to Mount Doom to destroy it, but also trying to defeat Sauron's armies. And you can have a military victory where the allies win, or you can have a victory just by getting the ring to Mordor. And if you're playing as Sauron, you're kind of trying to prevent the opposite of those things. And we've always liked those kind of alternate, competing victory conditions, even in Boss Monster, that you can sort of die from souls or die from wounds or win with souls. Is a little bit influenced by that.
There's 2 goals. The first goal is to win. The second goal is to not get wounds by the heroes getting past your dungeon.
Yeah, and some people just play as there's a variant of Boss Monster where you just play at the end of the game. The player with the highest souls minus wounds is the winner, and that way there's no player elimination. And I like that method too, especially for if you're playing with like 4 or 5 or 6 players. But I do like the tension of the player elimination in the original Boss Monster. It's kind of fun. But yeah, with Dragon Prince, we pitched them 2 games, and originally actually the fighting game was sort of like the one we spent the least time talking about. But they asked us more questions about it. We ended up bringing a playable version of it, and we all liked it so much that it kind of moved into the first place. So we're still working on a cooperative deck building game that is more about that full saga and all the things about the show other than just the combat. But this is our first release, and we're really excited about it.
But did you ever have the idea of having Corvus in Dragon Prince Battle Charged?
Absolutely. Corvus is probably the number 1 character who's in the show who's not in the game. We've always thought there should be other, we'd like to do more. Probably the next biggest character is Prince Kasif, who is the Neolandian prince who kind of hulks out in that final battle. Both of those we've sort of set for expansion material. We've even done an expansion where Pyrrha the dragon, the red dragon that Soren fights in season 2, is rather than being just a card for Ezrin, is actually sort of like a game mode where you're fighting to free the dragon if you're the heroes. And
you're fighting to destroy the dragon if you're the bad guys.
Yeah. So that's something we definitely have a lot of ideas that when they come up in game design, you say, well, that's a really good idea, but let's save that for the expansion and have something that we can do in the future.
So you're gonna have like a Corvus expansion?
I think it would probably be Corvus and somebody else, though it's hard to say. We were originally going to say again.
The baker.
Barius, the baker. I think that would be funny. I think
he definitely could just throw a bunch of jelly tarts.
That's right. Hit people with his rolling pin. You could do like one deck that was 2 characters. That I've thought about that before. I don't know who Barius would be paired up with, but maybe
Ezrin,
Queen Anya or something. But yeah,
when you play the game, Ezrin would be paired up with him.
I assume Ezrin is going to learn all of his techniques from Various. Ezrin has a ranged attack in the game, and we never really, his basic attack, we don't really say what that is. With Callum and Claudia, you assume their ranged attack is just some sort of magic spell. With, Soren and Rayla, you assume their melee attack is just them, hitting you with swords. But I like to think that Ezrin's basic attack is throwing jelly tarts at people.
And then just making them get stuck to the ground so that he can hit them.
Exactly.
Are you really competitive when playing board games, or do you like to play board games just to spend some time playing board games?
I will answer that question, but I'm curious what the answer is for you guys.
Competitive. I'm competitive toward Peyton all the time.
Not all the time. We sometimes play cooperative games. Usually,
yes, when it is a game that you cannot be competitive, I am cooperative. But when we can be competitive.
Are you more competitive, or do you play more for the fun of it?
It more depends on my mood.
Okay, for me,
your mood is mostly always play for the fun of it.
Or competitive, if you beat me 100 times.
If I beat you a lot of times in a game, then you will start being competitive.
And win.
Yes, when you get competitive, you win, but you don't get competitive too much.
That happens if I get mad. If I get mad at him, then I will win a game.
I hear that. Well, I am also a little brother, and I think in my case, my brother is so much better at games than me that I think I just had to learn how to play games for fun, or I would have just been really frustrated.
He learns how to play games for fun too.
I think for me, especially now that I'm a game designer, I love to just sort of play a new game and see how they've tackled things in terms of the game mechanics, or what new kind of techniques you can pull in, and different action selection mechanisms and things like that. Rather than playing a game a bunch of times and becoming an expert at it, I tend to jump to the next game and learn what I can from that. I'm kind of the same way with video games too, where I don't have a huge desire to beat the game. I want to see what it does. I want to see all the different nooks and crannies of the game, the different, classes you can play as, or the different abilities you can unlock. But once I've done that, I'll kind of jump to the next video game.
That's what I do in
in a particular video game.
Zelda? Have you ever heard Zelda? Breath of the Wild.
Oh yeah, I'm totally that way with Zelda.
Yeah, I'm like that with a very particular game, Zelda, because our mom beat it and she was angry at it because she went right back to before she beat it. So I'm just trying to find everything I can before I beat it, so I don't get angry at the game.
She didn't get all the shrines. She got all of them, but the one in Ganon's castle.
I mean, that's a game that really is all about exploration and finding every thing that you can do.
Peyton found a giant crater full of tiny rock monsters, and I think a giant rock monster decided to do a cannonball on the ground and exploded.
Yeah, I love how much you can discover in that. Even playing Mario Odyssey this morning, I love it if I can play a game and discover a lot of things and not have to check a guide to tick off every little thing. If a game kind of when you go off searching for something, there's something to find. That's really nice.
But in Zelda, have you ever gotten through one of the places with a bunch of those spider robots?
I have, but I'm not usually very good at it. So I have some sons. I've got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an almost 6-year-old, and the 12-year-old and the 14-year-old are definitely better at video games than me now. My 12-year-old plays Zelda on master mode and knows every trick to, beat the game using only underwear and a shield. And so if I get to those points, I'm just hey, buddy, come here, do this part for me.
I have no idea what master mode is.
You play where you can't see your map, and there's just I'm pretty sure there's limited items you can get, and there's more blood moons.
I think everything's harder, and I think maybe if you die, it's forever. But yeah, I know it's harder, for sure.
Well, for master mode...
Okay, I'm not gonna die then.
If in master mode you can't see your map, that's easy. Mostly I just wander around anyway.
Oh, I rely on my tiny little map on the screen.
Oh, you're talking about that thing. That thing, I never look at it. I just look at the giant map.
So actually, video games were originally, sort of something I wanted to do professionally. I used to write video game reviews for a website called nintendorks.com. And, it made me want to maybe get a job in like video game marketing. I don't have any programming background. I knew that I wouldn't be able to develop games, even though I really wished that was something I could do. So I started looking for jobs, at that kind of company. I interviewed at Atari. I had internships at a company called THQ that no longer exists. But then the kind of tabletop games industry became something I was sort of more aware of. I started playing games like Catan and games like, War of the Ring and Netrunner and these other things that were out. And it kind of occurred to me, I don't need to make video games to make games. And you can see my love of video games definitely reflected in something like Boss Monster. But what's really cool is when you're a tabletop game designer, you don't need necessarily like a big, crew of people. You can kind of make something working with just a couple of partners and design it and put it out there and have something that, people have fun with. And it's something almost anybody can do.
Do you have any hobbies that aren't related to games?
Yeah,
you just said a
absolutely.
lot of hobbies that are very related to games.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my interests are kind of geeky things. Like I've always loved fantasy and sci-fi books and movies and, comic books. I grew up reading Marvel comics,
I
nonstop.
love Marvel.
Yeah, Marvel is one of my favorite fandoms for sure. So a lot of those things, but I also really like hiking. I really like tennis. I try to play tennis at least once a week. So yeah, I think it's good to have a wide variety of hobbies. I also, theater is something I did a lot of, like musical theater in high school and stuff like that. I wasn't a good enough singer to just be a singer. I wasn't a good enough actor to just be an actor, but I could do both of those things okay. And also because I was a boy, they usually had more space for boys. There weren't as many trying out. And so that was always a really fun thing for me. I never thought I would do it professionally, but it was just fun, and it's still something I do. And I also like art. I'm not, again, an awesome artist, but I think it's good to do things that you enjoy, even if you're not a pro. You can just do things because you enjoy them and because it helps maybe kind of stimulate your creativity in all aspects of your life.
I love art.
When you started getting to the end of that list, you started sounding like Peyton. Because he likes art, he likes acting. Peyton likes art, acting, and singing, and doing a bunch of other stuff that you said. So you started sounding like Peyton by the end of that list.
But, in Zelda, I don't know if you've ever seen that crater that we were talking about, but
I haven't seen it.
But it's obvious. Like, have you ever been to Hatno Village?
For sure.
But you know that lake by it that has a boat? But right behind, there's like this big stone tower. But right behind that is a giant crater.
Okay, I will.
It's very obvious.
I will check that out.
Do not check it out because the rock monsters in it are very, they're tiny, but one punch knocks you 20 feet away from them, and then they keep walking and wake more up.
The easiest way to kill them is just get all of them close to you.
Throw a bomb.
Throw a bomb at them, run away. They're slow, so they'll stay by the bomb. So run away and then explode the bomb, and it will kill all of them.
And then you get a bunch of flint and amber.
Do you guys play D&D or any tabletop RPGs?
We played a role-player game called Quests of Yore. We started doing that, and then we started playing Dungeons and Dragons Adventure Begins, which isn't technically a role-player game, but I consider it a role-player-ish game because you can play it differently every time. But there's just so much variety in it. There's just so much variety.
I'm a sorcerer in it. Almost all my magic has failed me. One magic has not failed me. But all my maps, I have a pile of maps.
He's been using his maps
to make the maps come to life. They always fail on me.
Yeah, his maps burn up.
I think one of the fun things about D&D is it's like, it combines playing games with acting, which is a fun thing. It's always been a favorite of mine, especially if I can be the dungeon master and kind of come up with
But
things.
it's so cool how you feel like you're actually in the game because you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Except for just kill the monster by punching it.
Well,
yeah, you can't. There's always those limitations, but I think that's fun too. Like I play, sort of make-believe games with my 6-year-old all the time, but there's always the, just pretty much whatever he says is what ends up happening. But I like the unpredictability of like you try something really cool and then you fail, or you come up with a creative idea and you succeed, and that's really fun for me. I play a Star Wars role-playing game by Fantasy Flight Games, and I've played D&D and stuff for years. D&D was a big influence on Call to Adventure, and we're working on a version of that right now that's very like D&D inspired, I would say, where you can make that kind of where you can make a character that's an elf or a dwarf or a sorcerer or a rogue, and that's a lot of fun. And I even, when I was younger, made a really cool Zelda RPG.
Do you like playing big and heavy board games that take a long time to set up and play, or do you like playing short and simple games?
That's a good question. I definitely, have had some great times playing really big and heavy board games. Like, I mentioned War of the Ring, Game of Thrones. That game can take a really long time and get really involved. And I have a great time with those games. But I'd say I tend to like games that you can jump into pretty quickly and play through and, get into and get out of again. So that's really the kind of games we try to make. If we can make, I'd say one of the top things that we ever do when we're designing a game at Brotherwise is say, okay, this is good, but how can we make the game a little bit shorter? Because one of the rules of game design, one of the best tips I've ever gotten, is try to end your game leaving people wanting more. Try to make it so that it ends right before people are ready for it to end, and that makes them want to then go on and play like the next session. So for me, Ascension is very much that way. It's a game where it's a deck building game, one of the first deck building games that came out, and still one of my favorites. And with that one, the pool of honor that you're pulling from, essentially the victory points pool, it depletes as you play the game. And so you can, one of the strategies is if you're ahead, you're going to try to end the game as quickly as possible. And I think that's something that often kind of leaves me wanting a little bit more. But yeah, whether it's Dragon Prince or Boss Monster or Night of the Ninja, a lot of my favorite Brotherwise games are ones that you can play multiple times in one game night. And that's also true with, some of the games that I like best.
Do you have any other advice for making board games?
I've got all sorts of advice for making board games. I think, one is like the same advice you'd get from any writer about writing, or any painter about painting, and that's just to do it. I think the difference between people who are successful in creative fields and not is often not down to the actual like creative talent. Like I've got a friend who's one of the best writers I know and could probably be a professional writer, but just decided not to do that, didn't keep writing and keep publishing and keep making new things. And I think with games, I have a tendency to like work on something until it's like 80% done and then be like, well, that was fun, I'm going to work on something else now. And my brother is really good at saying, no, let's finish that. Let's do that last 20% and actually make it. And so to do that, you have to be willing to make things that are not perfect sometimes. I've never released a perfect game. I have things I would go back and change in every game I've made, but at least I've made them and I've moved on to the next thing. And that has meant that we were able to publish things and get them into people's hands. So just making stuff, practicing making it, designing games for yourself, and then not just putting them in a drawer somewhere, but actually getting them to a point where you can play them, that I think is really, really important.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. I think. I mean, there's the ones there. Being able to fly would be really fun. Like I have dreams all the time where I can fly.
Maybe because your character is an owl.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe that's what I want to be. But I don't know. I think we always have this conversation in my house because we're watching My Hero Academia and we're like, oh, what quirk would you want to have? And I think the most useful would be some kind of mind control type power. It gets a little creepy. Like I feel like there's a lot of bad ways you could use that. But if you had the power to be sort of super persuasive or super charismatic, that would be, I feel like, the most useful power you could have.
But, like, mind control, like, knock somebody out not without even touching them?
I mean, that's one thing you could do with it. It's almost more like the Jedi mind trick thing. Being able to be like, hey, you should let me be able to walk through this door and like be able to just, that way you can just walk right past encounters. Like in D&D, if you can get a really good like enchanter or bard type character, you can like bypass all sorts of encounters without having to, make a single combat roll.
So you could just do the Jedi mind trick in D&D if you had the right things.
Yeah, it usually doesn't work against like the actual bosses. Like it's a great way to get past minions, but then with the actual bosses, then you need somebody who has a bigger power.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever used when designing a board game?
Ooh, I like this question. The first thing that comes to mind is in Call to Adventure, where there are plastic runes in the final game. We actually used like real Norse runes that we bought online from like bones in the prototype versions of the game. So that's kind of weird, right? Like playing a board game made from actual animal bones. I think that's probably the weirdest thing that we've used.
What theme do you like more, monsters or cats?
Oh, I gotta say, I like monsters more as a theme. I've always been more of a dog guy than a cat guy, and monster cats though, that could be a pretty good one.
Okay, that brings like scary thoughts. Cats are already kind of scary when they want to be.
Like Ryan and the Last Dragon, the giant cats.
Yes. We end all of our interviews with a couple would you rathers. Are you okay if we end this one too with that?
Sounds good.
Would you rather always have a strong wind in your face or have to go through every minute of life in a wet drizzle?
Ooh, I like wind. I would be totally okay with that. Some of my favorite characters in fiction are all about wind, like Callum and Avatar Aang and stuff. So give me wind anytime.
Would you rather never wait in line again or never get stuck in traffic again?
Ooh. I think that the traffic one is probably more relevant because I live in Los Angeles. I don't have to be in that many lines. Like that's like when I go to an amusement park or like the DMV, that's like occasional, but traffic is every day when you live here. So that's an easy choice.
Unless you don't go anywhere.
Which is also kind of what happens since I work in my own home. I don't actually spend that much time in cars these days.
Would you rather turn around 3 times before you sit down anywhere like a dog or do a little jig before you go through any doorway?
I like the dog one. That seems, my dog used to do that all the time, and I think that actually seems kind of fun.
Would you rather have a plugged nose or always plugged ears?
I think I'd rather have a plugged nose. I get sinus infections all the time anyway, so it wouldn't be that different. But I wouldn't want to be able to like hear worse because listening is very important.
Yes.
Especially when doing something like this.
Exactly.
Thanks for spending some of your time with us today.
I hope I get to interview you again.
This was really fun.
Awesome. Well, next time we'll definitely have to have my brother because we're brothers, you're brothers, and maybe you guys will design some games someday too.
We will. But
awesome.
Make sure to try to find that crater in Zelda.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging out with us on this episode of Kid Talk.
Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.
See you later. Bye.